Looking in detail at one of our top stories this morning, the UAE setting up new prosecution officers focused on financial crime. It all sounds very Netflix series. Very pleased to be joined in the studio by Rebecca Kelly. She's a partner in the regulatory and investigation practice at the law firm Clyde & Co. Rebecca, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, guys. Good to be back.
While we plot the Netflix pilot here, tell me, what kind of crimes are these two officers being set up to prosecute?
At the outset, these particular officers are going to focus on anything to do with economic crime. So when we think about economic crime, we're dealing with anything that where there have been any funds that have been untraceable or the source of origin has been linked to an illegal activity. So what we commonly refer to as anti-money laundering or terrorist financing. So where there has been any illegal ill-gotten gains and predominantly in respect of financial gain.
Why do you think they're being set up now?
They really have to be, and we would expect them to be set up in order to actually prosecute, investigate, and enforce the legislation that's been enforced for a few years now anyway. So what we have is a system whereby there are provisions in the anti-money legislation that prevent and prohibit various activities when it comes to anti-money laundering. I'll focus on anti-money laundering because that seems to be where we get the most understanding really about what economic crime is. But what we have is the legislation in place, but then we actually need a dedicated and professional and specialised unit to actually investigate and prosecute those crimes.
Okay, so we're big fans of billions here in the studio. We're big fans of Succession. How much power do these officers actually have?
They will have to have a lot of power. And one of the biggest sort of misconceptions about doing business in this market is companies' obligations for disclosure to government bodies. And so one of the provisions that will allow the prosecution office to sort of exert their power, let's say, is their ability to request information from any company, any individual, directors, officers, lawyers, any designated financial services and non-financial services entities in respect of any purported transactions, alleged transactions or suspicious transactions that fall within the remit of the anti-money laundering legislation.
And what kind of penalties could we be talking here?
You know, the penalties are severe. What we have is financial penalties, and those financial penalties run anywhere from the lowest at 300,000 dirhams up to 50 million dirhams. But then we have jail time for those directors and officers that were responsible, and also the perpetrators that sometimes sit outside of companies, of course. And then we also have the ability for the prosecution to make orders around revoking companies' licences, prohibiting individuals from acting as directors at any time, and also where, depending on the nationality of the individuals who have been prosecuted, deportation orders for those that have been involved in anti-money laundering.
Is financial crime, as we come out of COVID, as we've got the war in Ukraine, whatever it happens to be, is it on the rise? Significant increase, and I would actually agree with you in respect of the COVID issue, because a lot of companies moved their business operations to platforms, so technology platforms, to allow people to sit at home, and I think that that's an accelerated response to something that was probably 5 or 6 years away. But what we have now is the introduction of technology that allows both the criminals and the companies to have online platforms that are not necessarily secure, which allow for opportunities for financial crime to be, for any of these sort of crimes to be part of what. I'm trying to think of what to say. The increase in financial crime, I think, relates directly to the availability of technology for these companies and for the criminals. We were speculating earlier this morning, and in fact yesterday when we were speaking to a tax lawyer, Nils van Hassel was in the studio, as to whether we effectively not create crime, but we create more laws for people to fall foul of as the economy matures and progresses. We're bringing in a corporate
tax regime, so corporate tax evasion becomes a thing. We've got more companies IPOing, so there are more disclosure and insider trading or whatever else rules for them to fall foul of.
I think in direct response to that, we are also catching up with the rest of the world. So tax evasion in most sophisticated jurisdictions is illegal. What we see with anti-money laundering is also a system that's been in place in more mature markets for a long time, and so now we really do expect there to be some sort of prosecution and enforcement of that. Prior to and this legislation for anti-money laundering has been around since 2004. There's been some significant amendments over the last couple of years, but actually it's been in place for a long time, and I think that part of the missing piece has always been their ability to prosecute and enforce the perpetrators.
Do you expect to be dealing more with financial crime, we've got about 30 seconds with you, going forward related to some of the new laws and legislation we've got?
I mean, most of my work day to day has some aspect of financial crime in respect of what clients are seeing. It's either being perpetrated against them or they are the victim of it, and then they look to me for, advice on what they actually need to do to recover their funds, and we can't do that without the assistance of the Public Prosecution Office.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Rebecca Kelly, partner in the fabulously named regulatory and investigation practice at the law firm Clyde & Co. We appreciate your time this morning. Looking in more detail at one of our top stories, which is those new prosecution officers being set up here to deal with financial crimes such as money laundering.
Dubai Eye 103.8.
Join the conversation.